Hi everyone. So today we're going to be doing the Pilgrims of the Plymouth Colony. I attached this graphic organizer to the instructions so that you have a good idea of what's super important for you to be taking note of. But before we get into the Pilgrims in the Plymouth Colony, we have to talk about religion at this period of time. A lot of you were suggesting, when I asked you guys during the Roanoke and Jamestown units, why would the colonists want to settle the New World? A lot of people suggested that it was due to religious freedom, and I told you guys to hold on that we had these specific, mostly economic reasons at the time to start these New World settlements, and that we'll get into religious freedom a little bit later on. Here we go, right? And this concept is so important. You need to be thinking about religious freedom is so core to what's going on here that instead of starting with Pilgrims in Plymouth, we're just going to start with the Protestant Reformation overall. And I'll attach the link to this article in the instructions for what you guys are working on today. So the Protestant Reformation. So the Roman Catholic Church dominates religion and culture throughout the early 1500s. The Roman Catholic Church is actually so powerful that they're the central political authority over what is essentially a country at the time. It's in the middle of Italy. It's called the Papal States, right? And a lot of people take issue with the Roman Catholic Church having its centralized political authority over a set piece of land, and also this religious and cultural authority over essentially all of Europe. This kind of, you see pockets of this in large, very influential pockets of this dissent against the Papal States and Roman Catholic Church popping up all over the place. You have Martin Luther beginning the Protestant Reformation in Germany in 1517. You have John Calvin in France. Basically, a lot of people who are all kind of alluding to this core idea that the church has too much political and religious authority over individuals, and that individuals should be able to determine their own religious interpretations, and that the only real Christian authority is the Bible. That the Bible is the central authoritative text, and that in order to be a good Christian, all you need to do is to understand the Bible really well. You don't have to necessarily listen to these specific religious officials. We also see the history of the formation of the Church of England coming up in this history of the Protestant Reformation, namely here, with the Protestant Reform in England beginning with King Henry VIII in 1534 because the Pope wouldn't grant him a marriage annulment. The Pope wouldn't allow him to cancel his marriage. King Henry rejects the Pope's authority, forms the Church of England, and then England is kind of in this back and forth state over how the central political authority in England and Great Britain reconciles its relationship with the Catholic Church and the Protestant movements, right? Protestant movements being any of these people, any of these religious movements away from the Roman Catholic Church. You can consider most of those to be Protestant movements. This article also gets into the formation of the Plymouth Colony, since that's super important to the Protestant Reformation. This, like, the characterization of the Protestant movement, especially after, like, in the 1650s. But we'll get into that in this document. Everybody has to read this, though. I'm going to attach this for a reason. It's not just for your reference. Everybody has to read this. This is super important and crucial information to give you some background on the Plymouth Colony. So let's go back to the Plymouth Colony. So we have the Church of England. The Church of England being essentially the English Crown's Roman Catholic Church. The Church of England being the religious authority that is directly under the political influence of King James I, Queen Elizabeth, those centralized English monarchs, right? They have certain rules that force people to comply with things that they felt like were taking away their freedoms, such as the taxation. They have to attend church services through the Church of England, and they also have to share common prayers. They're like centralized prayers that everybody kind of has to follow. People are kind of sick of this. We have a couple splinter groups that come about as a result of how dogmatic, how authoritative the Church of England is, and how authoritative King James can be about instituting, about asserting the Church of England as the religious authority in the region. We have English Catholics who do not comply with the Church of England. Instead, they turn to the Pope. They still turn to the Papal States to be the head of the Church. And then also Puritans, Protestants who wanted to see some changes made to the Anglican Church, the Anglican Church being the Church of England. This is one of those Protestant groups that are more concerned with the authority of the Bible than the authority of any any religious figures or religious institutions. The same can be said for separatists. Separatists wanted to break away from the Anglican Church and form their own churches. They had the same idea that the Bible is the central authority, but they were just sick of the Church of England and they didn't want anything to do with it. They will end up going to... No, it's not here. They will end up going to the Netherlands, but due to poverty and their children being too assimilated into Dutch values, they are not happy in the Netherlands. And after about a decade in the Netherlands, they go to Plymouth, England to stock up on supplies, and then 100 of them continue going on to North America. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. So they initially intended on going to Virginia. That was the plan. They make an agreement with the Virginia Company where they would work for a share of profits, and then they would be able to form their own communities apart from Jamestown. They have certain assurances that they would contribute to the common good of the region, especially the economic common good of the region. And they had also communicated very specifically with John Smith. Remember, John Smith injured himself in the settlement of Jamestown. He goes back to England. This communication happens around the... You could kind of see in this publication that's in this image a description of New England by John Smith that's written in 1615, 1616. That gives you a little bit of a timeline of when this communication would take place. This is after John Smith had already been in Jamestown, that he is communicating with the separatists before they make their move to Plymouth. They depart for North America in 1620 with 104 colonists aboard the Mayflower. Bound for Virginia, the Mayflower runs into winter storms, which blow them north of the Virginia Territory. That's how they end up in present-day Massachusetts on the coast of the Cape Cod Bay in 1620. And then here's a map that kind of tells you what we're looking at. First landing of the Mayflower, all the way out here in the Cape Cod Bay, and then Plymouth is here. These are the two main areas that we're going to be looking at with today's lesson. So there are some valid political conversations that are taking place aboard the Mayflower, right? Especially with this claim by the indentured servants. It would make sense that their indentured servitude being essentially that you are somewhere between a common laborer and a slave. You are like you basically sell yourself, and you sell your labor by contract, or not sell yourself. It could also be a result of a legal punishment. But essentially, you come to this arrangement wherein You basically do not have all of your personal freedoms, and you have to perform labor for somebody else who's contracted, who you've sold your contract to, right? It would make sense that those indentured servants would be looking at each other and going, now wait a minute, we're not England anymore. We're separating from the Anglican Church. We're separating from the English monarchy. We'll get into what it means later on, but Plymouth ends up being a proprietary colony, meaning that the colony was not formed under, while its character is mostly of England, of English people, it's not settled under the authority of the English crown. It's not like a part of England right away. It would make sense that these indentured servants are going, wait a minute, we're not a part of England. What authority is making sure that these contracts still stay in place? Who governs over these? If I have a dispute over these contracts, who would I go to? Not that if they had a dispute over these contracts that they would have a really good course of action anyway, even if they were still in England. So they're like, well, we want our freedom. We're not a part of England anymore. The Pilgrims were like, we don't want to deal with this. So even though they make a plan for self-government, they still pledge their loyalty to England and promise to obey the laws. They also promise to obey their own laws that are written out in the Mayflower Compact, which is the first written plan of self-government for the English colonies. And then here, just everybody has to know this. Everybody has to know this. That the Mayflower Compact is the first written plan for self-government in the British American colonies. Anybody who's paying really good attention, you'll remember what were we looking at in Jamestown that was super important in terms of self-government? The Virginia House of Burgesses, right? And then what year was the Virginia House of Burgesses first meeting in? I believe it was 1619. So we're looking at these motions to self-govern virtually right at the same time. So they call their settlement the Plymouth Plantation. Nearly half die in the first winter because of disease and starvation. We've been over this extensively, how hard it is to make a brand new settlement, especially with such low numbers and such limited resources. After the sudden death of the first leader, John Carver, the Pilgrims elected William Bradford as their governor. William Bradford is a super important person to remember. Make sure that we remember William Bradford is like the first true governor of the Plymouth Plantation. The first super influential leader. So this is complicated. I don't want you guys to understand the relationship between the Plymouth Plantation and the Wampanoags in such simplistic terms. I'm going to attach a resource for you to understand this relationship better after this video. But essentially, yes, the story here is very much the same as the story in Jamestown, where the colonists needed the local Native American populations to survive. We see the same thing take place here. Colonists still need the local Native American populations to survive in terms of acquiring food-based resources. They need them to learn to grow corn, pumpkins, squash, and also to find good game spots to hunt mostly for poultry, birds. And they survived their first year in Massachusetts. Woo! Before I move on to the other resources, I just want to show you. It's not here, it's here. We just did a DBQ, so we're not doing a whole DBQ, but I just want you to do this worksheet based off of these two primary sources. We'll see the author of one of them being John Winthrop, who's also a super influential figure in the Plymouth Colony, and John Cotton. These two documents are very much implicated in religion. I don't think we need to look at it very long to see God and Lord pop up in both of these documents all over the place. While they have very different takes on the interpretation of the relationship between religion and settlement, we'll see that they're both pretty deeply interconnected to each other. Make sure that we are answering all the questions, which is 3 questions for each document, and then this centralized question, were the Puritans selfish or selfless? I expect this to be like a 5 to 6 sentence long paragraph response. This is the main thing that we're working on. We do the notes, and then I want you guys to do the notes, to read this resource, to read the information that I give you that gets into more detail about the relationship between the Plymouth settlers and local Native American populations, and then just and this is a good guide for your notes. Make sure that your notes at least cover this stuff, using all of the resources that I give you, and then you're doing that. And then you're doing this worksheet, these 2 documents, and the following questions. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you have a good day, and enjoy your day of virtual learning, and enjoy your weekend.